So Pattie Porter is the Texas conflict coach. She's the president of Conflict Connections, Inc. And over 16 years ago, Pattie began a passionate journey to help people manage and resolve conflict in their lives. So by doing so, she has helped hundreds of people and work teams release their angst, yay, and move forward with more productive relationships and constructive action steps. She is a credentialed, distinguished mediator. She's an advanced practitioner, workplace mediator. Those are designations by the Association for Conflict Resolution. She has her certified advanced conflict coach and mentor through Synergy, and she's an accredited trainer also through Synergy.
She has lots of letters behind her name.
She does. She's also the host of the Texas Conflict Coach Show at Blog Talk Radio. Her show aims to coach you through conflict constructively to become more self-aware, build your conflict competency skills, learn to negotiate more effectively, manage and cool your hot buttons effectively. Hello.
Ooh.
Yeah. There you go. And learn resources and tools for effective conflict resolution. And you can listen to her Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. So welcome to our friend.
We're going to bring her on Skype.
We're going to bring her on
Everybody
Skype
cross
today.
Your fingers.
There she is. Yay. So one of the really cool things that I saw is that you've got Why Women Don't Ask, which is one of my favorite books. You've got the author of that coming on your show.
I do, and she's doing a 2-part show because she had her first book, Women Don't Ask, and then the second book that she also co-authored is Ask For It. So she'll be doing a 2-part show on the 11th and 18th.
That's awesome. That's really awesome.
And can you catch this on Blog Talk? Or I know that Scooter's probably going to add it in our chat room, but I'm just curious for our listeners that aren't in the chat room, how can they find your show?
They find my show by going to www.blogtalkradio.com/Texas, TEXAS conflict coach. And the show is every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Central Standard or 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
That's fantastic. How long have you had the show?
In April, it will be 2 years. So it's been quite the journey being a radio show host. I've really, really enjoyed it. And I've had some fantastic guests on the show.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and I've learned a lot from watching it. So guys, there are very few of us out there that don't have challenges with conflict with our own reactions and in our teams. So this is a valuable resource. I'm really glad to have her on. So we were talking today about conflict competent teams, and I think the first thing we probably ought to do is ask the question, what does conflict competent mean?
Well, to first start off with, the word conflict competent was actually coined by the authors Craig Rundy and Tim Flanagan in their first book, Becoming Conflict Competent Leaders. They actually have a series of 3 books. And when they decided to look at conflict competency in leaders, the way they defined it was their people's ability to understand that by dealing with conflict constructively and productively, it's crucial to the health of an individual, a team, or an organization. Also, one that's conflict competent means that they understand and they're aware of their hot buttons, of their triggers, and not only aware, but then how do they respond to those triggers that they have respectfully and effectively versus going off, for example. And then the third element of being conflict competent is, their ability to learn and demonstrate effective conflict resolution skills. And one of the other things is being able to recognize conflict before it actually occurs. And so how do they approach it when they know that it's something they have to deal with? So that's essentially what being conflict competent means.
Well, that would be, there's a change coming in the company. And what's everybody's hot button going to be? Because that happens every day. It's like watching that. Have you seen that movie Up? I think that's what it's called, Up.
With George Clooney.
Yes. Talk about I bet if you watched that, and this is just a question totally out of the air, but you probably looked at it from a totally different vantage point than just the regular viewer on different people's hot buttons. So you're looking at the economy that's going on, plus the change that's about to happen with firing all these people.
So up in the air, not up.
Up in the air, something like that.
Up was the cartoon.
Oh, well, the cartoon probably had some conflict too. Every story has to have a little bit.
It's really funny. I used to give as an assignment to my clients when they were doing conflict coaching to watch Survivor. Because those are real highly stressful situations, and when they were triggered, how would they respond to that? Now, of course, it was a reality show, but that was extreme stress that they were being triggered, and for them to really watch that and to see, how do they identify to those triggers, and what do they find themselves defaulting to when their hot buttons are pushed?
Yeah, I think it's so important because most of us, well, at least some of us, deal with conflict effectively when our buttons aren't pushed. And it's interesting because I've got a client who has a pattern of it's okay, enough, and then ba-boom.
It just builds.
It just builds, and she tends to deny that the conflict is actually happening. So there's some self reality there that needs to be observed, as well as handling it effectively, because the tools in the tool belt are great up until the point that you're screaming at somebody. So Pattie, when you're working with folks, how do you help them with that trigger point, knowing that being able to catch themselves, I guess, before what's the word? Before it's too late.
Before it's too late.
Well, before they go into their automatic mode, because sometimes it's not blow up, sometimes it's avoid.
Exactly. Well, first of all, I think it's really important to understand that, when we talk about being conflict competent, one is that awareness of what our triggers are. So when we know, first of all, we talk about emotional intelligence, which is an area we'll talk about later when it comes to building conflict and competent teams. But we are hardwired in our brain. We have what we call the amygdala. And the amygdala is the part of our brain, is the emotion feeling part of our brain. And so when we anticipate a threat, and I don't mean just a physical threat, a threat to I'm not being acknowledged, I'm not being heard, I'm not feeling respected, I don't feel like it's fair. Any of those things that we feel as being threatened or challenged, our amygdala, kicks in, and all it knows, from our long history as animals in this world, is that we fight or flight. We've heard that all the time. We either get aggressive or we avoid. And that's what your client is doing, is that their tendency is to avoid until the trigger becomes a point that it crosses the boundary. It's that straw that breaks the camel's back, and all of a sudden, like you said, kaboom, they go to the fight. They defend themselves. They get aggressive. They get confrontational. The thing about it is there's a lot of other skills that can be learned and used that's in between fight or flight. And that's what we need to, teach people when we're, when I'm coaching clients, I say to them, at what point, are you on one side of the pendulum where you're avoiding, and then something crosses a line and now you're way on the other end and you're fighting. You need to recognize way before then, when do you start to deal with the conflict more effectively? And that's getting over the fear that a lot of us have about dealing with conflict. And so part of that is bringing that level of awareness and then helping them to think through their thinking, which is the neocortex of our brain. How do we engage our neocortex, the thinking part of our brain, so that we can cool ourselves, slow down, and think about the situation rationally, and then have a strategy to approach the other person or the situation and the conflict early on?
Well, and then I would, just coming from my managerial background, being on both sides of the table, both being the employee being managed and coached, and the manager managing and coaching. So from the manager leadership role, knowing that you're going into some sort of a change, even if it is the acknowledgement of other people on the team, like you said, well, I didn't get someone out there saying I didn't get acknowledged, it's not fair. And knowing that right up front, and trying to somehow acknowledge and appreciate everybody so you don't hit somebody's hot button. Just knowing that as a manager going in. And a lot of managers don't recognize that they automatically go into a defense mode even if it isn't a good situation, that they thought, I'm going into this situation where I'm going to acknowledge a star player on the team in front of everybody, acknowledge them, and they're great, and everybody's happy. And then all of a sudden you have someone on the team that comes up and says, well, I wasn't acknowledged, and I did just as much, or I worked harder. And then that manager goes into defense mode because they were all in this happy, I'm acknowledging. How do you relate that to the manager, not necessarily the employee, the person that was hurt in some way, not recognized, but the manager knowing, how do you coach that, consult around, manager be ready for anything?
And Pattie,
versus just that.
Yeah, Pattie, let's start with that. We've got about 2 minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, it's very important that managers are just as conflict competent as leaders in dealing with that. So again, if someone's coming to them and they're feeling attacked, they're not prepared for the attack. The manager's getting defensive because they feel like, they're questioning their authority. They're questioning, they're being attacked, and their automatic response to that attack is to protect themselves. Now, again, depending on what their default behavior is, so they need to, again, to build this level of awareness about what triggers them, take a step back before they respond, and then go back to say, you know what, you're either right or yes, you've done a lot, but they need to take that step back to cool down, slow down, and think about what is that employee saying that they didn't need, has nothing to do with the manager necessarily from a personal standpoint, right. And how do you then really have a more constructive conversation?
Awesome. Great stuff, Pattie. I'm so glad that you're here. We're going to take a short break, and on the other end of the break, Pattie's going to talk about the kinds of conflict that we see in organizations and on teams, and what a team needs to do to build some conflict confidence. So we will be right back.